Hello and welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast, the essential podcast for teenagers looking to find their way into the creative industries. And creative industries is sort of this vague sounding thing, but really we mean the, film, TV, sometimes parallel industries, things that we feel that people that maybe come to summer camp or a different Young Film Academy course can transition into or grow into as they discover the elements of this creative filmmaking process. And this I think this episode is going to really capture that. So I'm very excited to be joined obviously with Amelia Sciandra today, as always.
Oh yeah, what's up, Dan?
What's up? And today we're going to be talking to a costume designer, which is tremendously exciting, isn't it?
Lovely.
Very cool. I recently watched the documentary on Steve McQueen. And that was incredibly inspiring, seeing all like the costume designs and sketches and the creativity involved.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I just
saw a new musical that came out in London called Flowers from Mrs. Harris, which is based on the novel, and they made a film of it last year or the year before, I think, as well, called Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. But it's all about she really wants to, she's a cleaner, and she really wants to save up money to buy a Christian Dior dress because she sees a Dior dress and it's the most beautiful thing she's ever seen. And so there's a part in the show where they all come out, a bunch of women come out wearing these incredibly gorgeous Christian Dior dresses. And my friend was in it, and I said to her afterwards, I was like, where did they get those dresses? Are they actually Dior? Because they were so amazing. It is. Yeah. I think sometimes costume art is taken for granted, and actually it's such a huge part of what makes people love film and TV and theater, obviously, yeah.
It really is. And it's the thing, if you overlooked it, genre, I feel like almost wouldn't work. Like, no. Can you imagine? Like, you wouldn't get period films looking so good. You wouldn't get sci-fis looking so good. Like it's so essential to sort of embodying the vision of the project. So I'm so excited that we finally do get to talk about it. And not only that, we get to talk about it with a very talented costume designer. So Samantha Hobart. If you stick around, you'll find out where you can check out some of her really cool work, including this very cool Cleopatra winged outfit.
Gown, it's incredible.
It's very cool. So without any further ado, welcome to the podcast. Sam, how's it going?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really good on this afternoon now.
I know. It's very exciting. You are actually, I think, the first person from the world of costume that we've had on the podcast. So this is, with great power comes great responsibility. Our listeners' excitement may hinge on your excitement levels, but no, I'm joking. No, I think one thing we try to say to all of our listeners is, we talk to people across all the different disciplines in film, which is so exciting because people get to learn about things that they otherwise wouldn't do, and it also helps them communicate better. So there'll be cinematographers listening that will learn stuff about costume and directors and stuff, and also just that communication then I think just goes to the next level. I always feel like the more you know about everyone else, the better. I don't know, in fact, for you, like, how did you get introduced to the world of film? Like, did you come from a theatre world? Or did you just really like film to begin with? And then how has your knowledge of other departments sort of changed during your time?
Yeah, so I came to the world of film by just loving everything film. I grew up with film. I grew up just watching, just glued to the TV and completely immersed in this fantasy world. And I feel like when I grew up in the world of Harry Potter, Narnia, all of these absolutely bangers of films. I was really fortunate growing up with these super incredible films. And it just felt that in a very boring world, I grew up in a is this rude to say I grew up in Leytonstone? There's nothing wrong with Leytonstone. It's not Narnia. And
it's not Milton Keynes, though, so it could be worse.
But being able to just watch a film and be completely transported, I just absolutely loved. So that sort of got me involved in the arty world as such. Not necessarily fashion or costume at this point, but I just loved anything arty. And I loved watching any Jane Austen type period film, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, all of those I would watch and just think, oh, I want to be this. I want to be one of these beautiful ladies.
Did you act then? Were you an actor sort of during your sort of teenage years? Because I feel like a lot of people start either wanting to be like a director or an actor. I did acting, and I think I got told no from one audition, and I was like, I've had it with this. I'm going to make my own damn films. You know? Like, did you see yourself on screen initially, and then you were thinking, but I can bring other people to life? Or
I would love to create a new backstory for me and say yes. I was always destined to be an actor, but no. I'm so shy in front of the camera. It's actually it's crazy. As soon as there's a backstage interview, I like freeze. I'm like the most awkward human being ever. Dan, you know me. I'm not that embarrassed to give my opinion about myself and costume. But as soon as the camera's on me, I'm like, yes, this is costume, this is clothes. Awful. Oh my goodness, it's embarrassing. But yeah, I just loved seeing, I guess that's my interest in fashion, maybe where that started, but just seeing these beautiful period clothes that aren't anything like what we wear today. I just thought it was absolutely amazing. And I think that always was in the back of my mind. So that combined with film in terms of fantasy and things like that, that really set me on the path towards film and how to sort of make that into a career. And it didn't occur to me that was an actual career until the Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland film. That was like the calling for me. I was like, I need to do this. I don't care what I do in this. I need to be someone who makes this happen. Yeah.
Oh, that was such a good film as well. That's the obviously you got like Helena Bonham Carter as like the Queen and stuff, right? And that sort of was sort of such a massive masterpiece of hair, makeup, and costume sort of all working together.
Absolutely.
Which I was going to ask, this is going to sound really philosophical, but I don't think it is. I was going to ask you like what costume means to you, because I always feel like there is inevitably always some overlap with like maybe props that are associated with certain characters as well. Like, where does your work in costume begin and where does it end? And I mean, I imagine it ends at the point of collaboration, but I just wondered how you see it. Like, do you visualize beyond the character and what they're wearing, or do you get to focus purely on that stuff? And if it says in the script, that they have a particular cane or walking stick, does that go to a different person?
Okay, I love that. It ends in the journey of collaboration. That's beautiful. I'll try and say something as philosophical as that. But for me,
no pressure.
When I design for costume, I always look to that end of the story, that end of the journey. I think that's really important throughout. So if we know as the filmmakers that a certain character will end up good or bad or dead or addicted, to show that just subtly in the costume, it won't make any sense to the audience at the beginning. The colour green, say, will not signify addiction or sickness. They won't get that at the beginning. Why would they? But I think it helps, something just like that, rudimentary like that. It just helps tell that journey very subtly, very subliminally. It helps tell that journey, even if it's not obvious at the beginning. It's always looking to the future, looking to where their journey is going to end, and just plant tiny little clues in the costume that will all sort of make sense at the end. Yes, I think
this is going to sound. No, you did. It's going to sound like a massive exaggeration, but you're already sort of blowing my mind a little bit. I don't know what, like, you know, as a director, I think a lot about what I want the characters to look like in the moment, and maybe sort of tones and colors, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But you're talking about like costume as storytelling, right?
I was just going to say that.
Almost foreshadowing and stuff, right? So does that start with the script? I imagine you get the script and you sort of work out where it can go, or where it's going, and then you sort of almost work backwards. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you know what? This doesn't going to make any sense. That sentence didn't make any sense. This doesn't going to make any sense. But I work forwards and backwards at the same time. So backwards in terms of knowing where they're going to end up and working my way backwards, and forwards in terms of this gut feeling of following the character on their journey. Do I like them? Do I hate them? Am I annoyed by them? Am I confused by them? It all needs to come together so that nothing's too obvious in a way. So as an audience, you're following this character, at some points maybe hating them if that's the character, or being annoyed or confused by them. But there needs to be those signs at the end of, oh, that's why he did that. I get that now. That's why she acted like that. So it sort of feeds into each other and just adds for more depth, I think, than just plotting, say, just going forwards. He wears this now because it's rainy. He wears this. It's just nice to include those layers. Jacket. Yeah, just give him a jacket. It's fine.
No, that's so cool. So with that storytelling, like, how much detail of that do you go into with the director throughout the process, or is there generally just trust in you? You just say, here are the costumes I'm thinking of, and then, you know, you almost don't. Do you get to share the research and the thought that you put into these things, or do people just look at the end results and just say, I like that, you know, and maybe don't even understand why your work is so effective at what it's trying to achieve?
Yeah, so it's different with every director. I usually preach my research and thought processes, whether it's appreciated or not. I'm like, he's wearing this because of this. And some directors will be like, wow, that's so cool. Hopefully, I don't know. They've never seen that. Hopefully they're thinking. But some of them, they're like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll leave you to it. It's really different. Every single person's so different. The last project I designed for the director, he was amazing. He just let me have free reign. He trusted me. He knew I had the vision. I understood his vision. He almost wanted to be surprised by what I was going to present to him. Luckily, when I presented it, he loved it. That's great. But
that sounds dangerous, wanting to be surprised. He will be wearing his trousers on his arms today.
Yes, and he was. But yeah, no, he luckily, all the cast, all the crew, the director absolutely loved the surprise, loved luckily what I came up with. But other directors needed to be in it right from the start. They needed their colours, like every single detail needed to be explained, needed to have a reason, needed to be argued, which I also see why that's helpful process for myself and for them as well, because we can both challenge each other and really think about every aspect of the costume of why is that there. And sometimes the answer is it's instinctive. There is almost no reason. Sometimes you just know that's the colour it needs to be. You just know it. And that's also important to follow, is your instinct.
Do you have to fight that? Sorry, no. You
go ahead, Dan.
Oh, no, we'll come to that after. I'm just going to ask, like, because so often you do have to fight against almost executives or other creatives and stuff, not in like a mean way, but just in like I always used to think that, you know, the best ideas will win, but actually sometimes it's how good you are at convincing other people that your ideas are actually good. Do you enjoy that challenge and that collaboration? Or is it, I suppose, maybe if you have that too hard on one project, it might just be nice to then have another project that follows and is just much more, I get to do what I want this time. Is the mixture good, or is there generally like some kind of middle ground that you're like, I would like a little bit but not too much, and that's sort of ideal for each project, so that I feel like I'm getting something rather than nothing from the director?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I'm so glad I've had both ends of the spectrum now, because I think meeting in the middle is probably the best way for everyone, so that I don't go power mad and go, I'm going to press them all in pink. And then the director isn't too, or the producer isn't too involved, and to the point where no one's getting their vision, because if they want to dress them, then they might as well do it. There's no point in me being that middle person. So meeting in the middle is good for everyone, I think. Just to feed those little ideas, that's the important thing, is just being able to listen to the right ideas from people, from anyone. They'll feed little pockets of interest. Maybe the actor will go, I think my character feels this. Is there any way you could convey this? And I could go, often I say, maybe we could do that through your jewellery. Even if it's not seen, is there a little pendant that could mean something to you? And that is often quite private between myself and the actor, that they can choose, okay, I want, on one of my projects, it was a little ballerina necklace, and that meant a lot to the actor, and it then became a real character thing. And although that was never explained in the story, I think you could feel it. You, as an audience member, you could feel that meant something, and that really helps the performance. So just being able to listen to ideas from everyone, but being able to tune out the wrong ideas, right ideas, and you sort of then can just about please everyone and still get the vision that you know will work on screen. But often it really is the language that you use and how you word. You can rephrase the same costume idea just tweak the wording slightly and go, by using this idea of yours, we can do this. And they're like, oh yes, okay, that's my idea, great.
Yeah. That's
you're talking about creative collaboration, negotiation, all of the things that, we try to teach all of our young people on our courses. It all is a part of it. And also I think it's really important you're talking about how your creative input as the costume designer is essential. Obviously, that's why you've been hired for that job. But there are other people in the conversation who ostensibly have more or less power than you do. If you've got an executive producer or producer in the room, I just think it's interesting you talking about kind of repackaging a comment and figuring out, how can I sell my idea back to you to make it sound like it's your idea? It is kind of all sort of negotiation. But the question I wanted to ask was, because I think we hear these stories kind of in the media of disagreements between actors and costume designers. And I just wondered if you'd had any kind of experiences perhaps with difficult actors who are not happy to wear the beautiful clothes that you've chosen for them, or how you've kind of negotiated that perhaps more delicate relationship than with a director. Because actors can be divas, is what I'm saying. And I speak as an actor saying that.
I see. I've had the pleasure of working with absolutely wonderful, lovely actors, but there have been some slightly difficult occasions, and I think what the bottom line is understanding that, having to understand their perspective, because they're putting a lot on the line. It's them in front of the camera. They can potentially feel quite embarrassed or exposed. Mm-hmm. So it really is just being very understanding that it's not that they're wanting to be a diva. Maybe they are, but I've never come across that, diva for diva's sake. It's purely that they're just a bit apprehensive about something, and they might not know precisely what it is, but it's talking them through your thought processes, not saying that this is what you're wearing because of this. It's that, well, I've got this idea for this. I think you should wear this for this reason. does that align with your vision for your character? Am I reading that correctly? Or is there something that perhaps you've had a conversation with the director about, a more private conversation about your character and your thought processes and your reasonings that maybe I haven't quite caught? And often just aligning yourself on the same page means that you're all reading the character. You all want this character to come to life as much as the next person, and it's just that collaboration and really just empathy of understanding how are we going to get this character portrayed correctly. And then if you all come from the same page, usually you're all on the same wavelength anyway, and you won't get things wrong. So even more difficult actors, it's just that perhaps you haven't explained your thought processes in the way that they need to hear it. And as soon as you do, they're like, yes, got it, understood. I trust, believe you. I know you won't embarrass me.
Do you normally get that? How often or how early into the process might you talk to actors about the costumes? Like, do you get to speak to them whilst the research phase is happening? Or what are the different phases, actually? I wondered if you could talk us through, you get a script. What are the steps that take you from script to having the costumes there and then? And I imagine even the getting part of the costumes changes because there might be some things that need to be made and some things that need to be just purchased. But yeah, what is the steps to go from script to screen, as they say?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. Thank you.
You are welcome.
So I actually, every single film I do is approached in the same way. I read the script, I mood board immediately. It's very instinctive. I get colours, I get textures, silhouettes down very, very, very quickly. Sometimes not even clothes. Sometimes I create mood boards with beautiful pictures, and there's actually no clothing at all. Sometimes it's just that feeling, because often directors like to work with that feelings, that mood board, as opposed to going straight to the clothes, because then it's like, this is how I see your film on this board, this is the mood I get, and I'm going to translate this to the costumes on this board. And this is all very, very specifically done before I meet or talk to the director. I think that's really important, and that's always worked really well for me, is presenting an idea to them before talking to anyone, because sometimes they're like, that's exactly what I had in mind. I love that. And oftentimes they say, that is nothing what I had in mind, but I'm so glad you presented this, because this is now all I can think of. This is a perspective that I have not seen, and I love that. So I think that I will continue to do. I love doing that, because then you can meet in the middle, you can see their ideas, your ideas, and I love that. But it always starts with research, always, whether it's contemporary, period, sci-fi, future, dystopian, any of that, it needs to be thoroughly researched. Luckily, I know my periods of clothing very well now, so it gets easier and easier the more you do it. You can then, instead of going, what did they wear in 1896? you can go, I know what they wore. I now want to change it, because, say, we're doing a slightly more modern version. We want some contemporary influences in with 1896. I will then feed in perhaps another period. I've done 1940s inspired 1896 before, which worked brilliantly because it was a completely fresh new take. And it had some resemblance as well. I can't remember why I did it, but there was some importance of why those two periods mixed. Or more recently, I did a dystopian dystopian future piece, that the director very much wanted it to be untimeable, undateable. We didn't know when this story occurred. That was very important to the story, that it was very confusing, just get everyone out of their senses, don't know what's going on. So I mixed 1920s with dystopian, whatever that means. And that worked perfectly well because it really, no one knew what was going on. It's like, I can see that there's some historical elements in this, but there's also some futurism, and that worked really well. So researching both periods as such, and then combining the colours and the themes and the feelings that were in that very, very initial mood board. And it's sort of combining all those layers together. And then obviously presenting these to the director throughout and sort of feeding that development of your design along. I do my own hand sketches always, especially for period. I use watercolour illustration. I know a lot of people now use digital, but I myself prefer the old-fashioned watercolour, just committing to page. And it's quite refreshing now, I think, for directors to see that, because they often work digitally. So they're quite like, oh, that's cool. You come straight out of the 1800s. I love it. And then the only difference is that for me, period is often hired or made from scratch. So then the process will be for me to, alongside sometimes a team of makers, depending on the budget, but a team of very talented makers will help me toile, which means making a calico, a very cheap fabric version of the costume, trying that on, showing the director. That's always quite a challenging part, because a full colour costume, say, is presented in this really ugly beige, fitted, yes, but not quite perfectly fitted because it's that first fitting and nothing's quite where you want it to be. But it's such an important process, and you can see all the disappointed faces because they want to see the character in a full, leather gown or something, and it's just not at that point yet. But it's so important, because it's the chance where we as costume can get the information that we need to then make the costume in the proper fabrics and the proper colours and the proper textures, which is great. Whereas a contemporary film is all bought and sourced from shops, or hired if it's uniforms. We did police uniforms together in our last film, and that's all hired from places. So yeah, that's where the differences lay.
Amazing. So you've got those. So once you then get those, you've done the fitting. I imagine, I know it varies probably, and I do have a question about budget in general. In the hope would be that you have a screen test. Is that, or is the filming happening during the fitting process as well, or is that a separate step that normally takes place after the fitting?
Do you know what? I've only ever had the luxury of a screen test once. Yeah. I'm finding that now, especially nowadays, my most recent projects, oh my goodness, the casting is so last minute. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, when I say last minute, on one of my most recent projects, we were shooting in Budapest in this beautiful, it was a period film, a short film, and we were filming in this fairy tale forest in Budapest. I didn't get casting until less than a week before we flew out.
No.
And it's
and obviously that's sizing as well and everything. Exactly. So you can't really buy anything or rent anything until you know how big and tall they are, right? How do you do that in a week?
Oh, honestly, it was just a lot of praying and miracles, but I had to go ahead and make something. But this is where I had to be very adaptable. I had to adapt the costume to be a shift, which is like a very simple nighty type thing, which is one size fits all as much as it can be. So it's being clever, going, okay, we can do that and take it in, take it out, whatever needs doing. And we used a corset, which again can be let out, made bigger, made smaller, add panels in. It was just having to adapt to much more complicated designs and not being too heartbroken that the vision that was on paper that was beautiful and the director and producers all loved and said, yes, we approved that. But as the time ticked on and we hadn't got casting confirmed, it had to be simplified, or not even simplified, it just had to be adapted so that different sizes could wear it, which meant at least we had a good costume, a really good costume, ready in time to fly out to Budapest in under a week.
And then once you then get to set, obviously in this case Budapest and stuff, what does your job become then? Obviously there's a lot of like research, discovery, putting the costumes together. It sounds like obviously that is just a really heavy, fun, creative process leading up to the shoot. Does it then become more of a management role in terms of just making sure people are wearing the right thing, or is there still creativity because you're having to solve problems? Like, could there ever be like clashes between costumes and locations? And do you ever, like if you put someone in a bright pink outfit and then the room happens to be bright pink, or are you aware of the spaces? What does the role become on set?
I like that. The classic clash between costume and locations departments. Always dueling. It's a really good question. It's a really good point. In terms of actually scenery, that is something very early on that I need to know what colours are in the background, because if there's a bright red wallpaper behind, a bright red costume will be absolutely of no use whatsoever. So yes, collaboration in very, very early stages. Before I get too excited about putting someone in a bright red costume, I need to know that will work. And sometimes then it could be an early battle. I haven't had it yet, but it will be coming, where my vision is she needs to be in red. He needs to be in blue. This needs to happen. And then art department say, but we want to use bright reds, and in all shots, that will be a battle that will be coming up. But then it will be a matter of going, who's going to be presenting that character, which is more vital, say. But luckily that hasn't happened yet. Oddly, a clash or something to keep in consideration that I'd never thought of, and you certainly don't get trained in this at university, is the sound department. Costumes are noisy. Yeah. And it didn't occur to me. Literally did not occur to me.
I heard silk is suspiciously like noisy. Like everyone would think that's sort of like the smoothest of materials, and like that one's always fine. But like silk is like so noisy because it's scratchy when it like interacts with itself, I think, or most other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just not something that I would have even considered before. And as you say, something like silk, if you're making the gown, that has to be done preferably a month in advance of buying that material, making it. That's a very long way away for sound to usually get involved in the later part of the project. That's very early on for them to say, oh, hold on, please don't do that. So it's really keeping in mind right from the early stages, how are we going to annoy sound the least?
And also, do you ever run into
jewelry?
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you ever run into, I had this on a shoot I did recently, where a costume doesn't really afford a microphone, and you have to figure out like where a body mic can go and be hid or not hid, depending on how the sound team wants to get the sound from that scene. So it where are you going to literally hide the mic pack? If someone's wearing a shift, that is see-through, where can you hide it, or how do you work that? So is that another thing that you've kind of encountered in working with sound that, again, you're not really trained in, and then suddenly you discover, oh, they need to be able to hide a microphone in this very low cut top or something like that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's been the challenge of my early career. Like, as you say, it's just these problems that wouldn't occur to me. I just think, oh, she's in a lovely little shift or whatever. Or for my and Dan's film, they were in very, very skimpy outfits, all of the men, as we know. Yeah. That was a challenge. Where do you hide these microphones? And again, it's a collaboration.
There's only one place.
It's only one place.
They're only wearing boxers, but it's probably too far away, isn't it, from the mouths for it to
yeah, exactly. But as always, it's that collaboration, that acknowledgement that both departments are important and need to work with each other. And with that acknowledgement, rather than any one being a diva and saying, no, I can't put mics. Gosh, no, I can't put mics in my costume, or sound go, well, we're going to put them wherever we want to put them. It's that understanding of each other and respect of each other. Often, more times than not, sound will go, it's okay, we'll boom this one, which is the big fuzzy stick. Why did I explain that? I don't know.
We've heard from some sound people. We now know on the pod what a boom is, so that's good. I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you on the other side of what you do, because I had looked at your Instagram and saw this very cool beetle wing dress that you had made for Cleopatra, which you told me was a personal project. So can you talk a little bit about your kind of personal costume projects and how you balance that with the work?
Yeah, absolutely. It is difficult balancing them. I find that if I have projects lined up, short films, commercials, music videos, if I have them lined up and I know that there will be a gap, I'll either try and fill that gap with a last minute commercial or something like that. Or sometimes I'll just go, actually, I quite fancy a couple of weeks off where I can just focus on sketching what I want to sketch, making what I want to make. I'm making my own collection at the moment for a very famous British fashion magazine. So I'm quite excited about that.
Amazing.
But it's just enjoyable making what I want to make and just presenting the ideas that I want to do. I think it keeps you quite fresh that way, and you can then really enjoy the project you're working on, scripted ones, because you wouldn't choose maybe to do that period or that genre of film, but it makes it quite exciting to be challenged to things that I wouldn't pick. Which is always fun, and finding areas of that subject matter that I will find really interesting.
How do you balance? It sounds to me like just sort of hearing you talk and go through your process, which sounds very cool and really in depth and detailed, but it also sounds a little isolating. And I just wonder do you feel that sense of working by yourself and then suddenly you're on set with lots of people? Or how do you navigate that kind of transition from it being really like you and your vision, your work, to it then becoming a kind of collaborative endeavor as it is when you work with the directors and the producers and then when you get to set?
Yeah, that's a good point, because it is very much like I'm by myself working in my studio, especially if we haven't got the budget for makers on the period projects to help me make. Luckily, recently I have had assistants and amazing makers and things like that. But some projects it's just by myself, and then, as you say, you're introduced to this massive cast and crew. You're like, whoa, there's other people working on this project.
It's not just me.
It's not just me. And with that thing of casting coming through so late that sometimes you can't even talk to the cast about their character and their thought processes because they're not cast yet. No one's that character yet. So it's just you and the director's vision for quite a while. And the director's so busy doing everything. I mean, they're involved in absolutely every single process that, you are sort of left to it sometimes. But it's still nice to be able to get your head in the space, fully in that world, and just try and make the most comprehensive, cohesive vision that you can then present, so that if someone is literally that day cast as this character, you can go, okay, I've got a little welcome pack of what I've been doing, and if they perhaps agree with my thought processes and things like that. But yeah, definitely trying to keep involved in as many departments that are hired as early on as I am in the process as possible, so that you can actually talk to people who are also obsessed with this world that no one else knows about because you're signed onto it.
How does I wondered about, you're talking about budget. Obviously, sometimes you can get other people in that can help make stuff. How does budget affect the decision making process or what you do? For instance, I know that on set, if you have limited budget, it always generally means limited time. So your blocking, as in like where the actors are going to stand, has to be far more streamlined and simplified so that you can shoot the coverage that you need of that particular movement. Whereas if you have more time, you can have more sophisticated and complicated blocking. because you've got time to shoot more shots, basically. And I wondered how the process changes, or what bits do change or what bits don't change if you're on like a high budget versus a low budget. And I know obviously assistance is probably a big thing, but in terms of bringing a character to life, if you can't afford to get that custom thing done or made, what is the process like on, say, like a cheaper film?
I found that all of my budgeting issues has always been involved with costume doubles. So perhaps if there is a fight scene and you need a stunt double, that means another human being wearing another sized costume. Or if there is any blood involved, blood is the worst thing for a costume because it could mean up to sometimes 7 costumes, which immediately you're timesing, even at the cheapest costume possible, you're timesing this cheap price by 7. And that's not just the actual physical cost of the item. In terms of making, it's the cost of labor, which in the period film, which was stunt and blood and every nightmare possible on a low budget, and it was period and handmade, it was with limited time and in Budapest was very difficult. So again, it's that conversation between you, the producer, and the director, and it's meeting in the middle. Sometimes on very extreme examples, it's the producer saying, we cannot afford to make this costume X number of times. We just can't. It's not possible. So it's that conversation between the producer and the director going, do we need to see this person get stabbed? Or is it so far in the distance? It's so ridiculous. They actually had to potentially change the story for the budget constraints of costume. But the director sometimes goes, actually, I was umming and ahhing whether to show the stabbing or not. And actually, we kind of wanted to do it from behind, so you don't actually see the person getting stabbed. And that makes such a big difference, even if it's such a big difference. And the difference between showing them stabbed already, between them in action stabbing, it makes all the difference as well, because we can stage the stab and have 2 costumes, one clean, one dirtied, one bloodied. So just 2 in total rather than a total of, say, 7 sometimes, if they want to keep doing the stab over and over again to position it correctly. It's such a silly puzzling it all together, and is never creative. The challenges actually with budget, I find, are never creative. I can do as beautiful a pieces on a tight budget as I can with a high budget. We won't say that to people because I want as high a budget as possible, but I will find a way of never cutting down that detail, whether it be with embroidery threads for period or whether for contemporary it's dirtying everything up and making them really worn and lived in. There will always be that same detail, regardless of budget, will always make it work.
And then the other side is obviously budget being one thing that obviously will have an impact on your role as well. But I wondered also about genre, and whether if someone says, it could be a sci-fi, I guess, but if it's a sci-fi comedy, is that then completely different as well? Where do you take your cues from? Is it just your understanding of genre itself, or does it not affect what you do, or is it dependent maybe on the director's input anyway, on their sense of tone rather than genre as categories?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, genre makes such a big difference. And as you say, that example of comedy, sci-fi, the comedy element, I would lift the colours up for. So I'm not sure, Dan, are we allowed to talk about Members Club? Or
yeah, I think sort of. I don't know. There's not a trailer out, so I think as long as we don't spoil it, then we're fine. But for those listening, Members Club is a film that I worked on as an editor, and I met Sam on, who was doing it literally an amazing job on costume. I remember, I can't remember what day it was. It was probably day like 3 or 4 that I suddenly was like, hang on a sec, this is like really good. Possibly because I think like the first day they were just stripping because it's about some male strippers. So like that, I was like, great stripper outfit sort of thing. But then just like as we got into the outfit, I think there was one particular costume that I just loved, which was that sort of 80s tracksuit. That was so good, and that one was so colourful, right? But yeah, no, you do talk about it, I guess.
Oh, good. And do you like how I put the blame onto you? So if we're not allowed to talk about it, I've technically not said anything about it. So thank you, lawyers. But yeah, for that one, it was a comedy horror. So usually horror would be quite dark and scary and bloody and things like that. But by just lifting these colours up and giving each character their own distinct personality. I'm sure I'm allowed to say this, but they are the four mains are main characters are men in their late 50s, early 60s, and giving them the importance of giving them each their own distinct personality. And I was preaching this during all of our early design meetings and prep phase and things like that. And everyone's like, yeah. But as Dan said, when it actually came to on camera, everyone sort of went, hey, yeah, I can tell that's that person and that's that person. Even from behind, even their silhouette and darkness, you could actually tell, I've got it. And it worked so well. But by amping up the colours, giving each character their own colour palette and stupid aesthetic, sometimes they actually fell in love with them, which was quite amusing. That the guys, some of them really didn't like their costumes at first. They liked them for their character. They understood that this is right for the character. But one of them had a really cool vintage jacket on. And he said, I would never wear this. I would never wear this. I get my character would, but I would never wear this. And by the end of shooting, he was like, can I take this home? I really love it.
It was very cool. I think, are we talking about the same jacket that's sort of like green and white and pink or purpley? I can't. It was so cool. I was obsessed with it. I wanted to nick it, but there was no way it was going to fit me.
Do you know, I don't know where it is now. I think I might have it. I was the only person that didn't want it in the end. Like everyone was like secretly slipping me bribes, like, can I have that afterwards? If it goes missing, it's not gone to me. And now it has gone missing. I actually don't know who's got it now.
That's what a guilty person would say, I reckon, Amelia. I don't know.
Do you, I saw a rough cut of that. I was lucky enough to see a rough cut of that film that you guys are talking about. And I wondered, what's your relationship as a costumer with hair and makeup? Because certainly with like a horror film, you're going to have potentially, if there's a monster of some kind or a witch of some kind, you're going to have costume elements, but then a huge part of what they look like is going to be hair and makeup as well. How do you work with that team when you are approaching really anything, but perhaps especially a kind of genre that requires big, bold characters?
Yeah. I'm lucky enough to usually work with the same amazing hair and makeup artist. We worked with her together on Members Club. Caitlin, she's amazing. But again, whoever you're working with, it's that discussion, that empathy towards each other's departments and respect towards each other's departments, that in prep you can have conversations like, what colors are we putting her in? So for me, I would go, oh, she's in pink, so their makeup might use pink in the makeup, or it's just little touches like that, so that you always know throughout there's no surprises. And it's especially true that when it comes to actually on the day of shooting, having that discussion of, do you want her in hair or makeup first? The costume, often it is, does the costume go over the head? In which case we'll do costume first. We don't want to ruin the lovely hair and makeup. For Members Club, we had huge prosthetics on the witch character. And a big sort of prosthetic suit that was part of costume. So it was very much this deal between hair and makeup and costume of, how do we make this actor the most comfortable, because it's it's really uncomfortable costume and full prosthetic to put on. How can we make her as happy as possible. And I also roping in the ADs of how long do we have until she goes on set, because it only actually takes, say, 20 minutes to get her completely ready. We want that to be as close to the time as possible so she doesn't have to wait around. So it's then a collaboration between 4 different departments, maybe even more, of how can we make this person really comfortable and get our jobs done as well as we possibly can, and smiles all around.
I was just going to say, I can foresee this terrible order of events where the whole prosthetic suit goes on, the prosthetic head, the costume, and then the sound department comes up and says, oh, we got to put the microphone on their body. And it's like, it's way too late for that. We've missed a couple of steps for us to get that mic on their body.
Do you know what? I can't remember how we mic'd the witch up, but however the sound department managed to do it was really clever. They were so swift and managed to get what they had out of it. I think it might have been a lot of ADR, so doing it afterwards, just to make sure the lines were really clear, because it was maybe just that challenge too many to also get sound working perfectly on the day. So I think that was the one thing we had to do afterwards in post.
So Sam, obviously you mentioned the watercolors and stuff like that, and I wanted to sort of draw us towards sort of the questions we always ask our guests, which was, what were you up to during your teenage years that you felt helped you best prepare? And so I was thinking, I assume drawing and painting, but I wondered if there was anything else maybe that indirectly turned out to be very useful. But I mean, if that's the thing, I mean, that sounds infinitely useful. I imagine it's much harder to teach yourself to draw in your 20s, I imagine, than as a teenager.
Yeah, I think I probably was always sketching and copying the work of other artists. You know, when you copy it for GCSE art, you have to copy it exactly. I can't remember what they're even called.
Yeah.
You had to go, you had to do Picasso one week and then Salvador Dali the next week. But honestly, that in my later years, I didn't at the time really understand why I was doing that, why they made us do that. Now I understand, because you can use the same brushstrokes and things like that from other artists. And I did it specifically for costume illustration. I would copy the works of Colleen Atwood and Sandy Powell. They're very famous Oscar-winning costume designers, and seeing how they drew and how they got their own distinct style. And I remember being really annoyed at myself because I didn't have my own distinct style yet, and I couldn't think of anything better than theirs. And now, all these years later, I seem to have my own distinct style. And someone actually came up to me in a costume house, because I think I'd done a sketch and it had gone missing, it had fallen on the floor, and someone went, "Oh, was that yours?" And I thought, how on earth did you know that? It hasn't got my name on it. And they said, I recognise it. That's your style. This is your style. I've seen it on your Instagram. And I was
that must be so validating.
So cool.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Because you hear that so often, don't you? Like, people being like, oh, you got to find your voice. And as a kid, that's like such like an impossible question. And like, I don't get it. I don't understand what that means. Or how do I find it? Where is it? Is it hiding somewhere? But it is just like, it's a thing that takes time and discovery, and patience, I guess. And then it's often more obvious to other people. And I think you often hear that you have a style from other people before you realize you have a style, maybe. But it's such a magical sort of transition. So Sam, our last question is, what advice would you give to that younger self, that Sam that's doing GCSE art, copying other artists because they've been told to? What advice would you give to that younger self?
I think for anyone, but especially creative people, is that know what you love. And if you love it, you're going to probably be good at it. And if you're good at it, you're going to love it. So really concentrate on the things that you love to do. I struggled in GCSE just focusing on A-levels or any type of exam situation on these academic subjects. I was good at school, but it was that obsession with, I need to get the grades, I need to do maths, I need to do English, I need to do, get as good a grades as possible. And I sort of lost myself in going, I'm not very good at these subjects, but I can do art, but I can do art. I'll put that to one side. I can do it. I love it. But I need to focus on these really hard subjects. And it's not just about school, but it's in further life, rather than concentrating on what you're not good at and trying really, really hard to get better at it. Of course, you can try and get better at it, but don't put aside the love that you have for the thing that you really love to do, and just focus on that and know that makes me amazing, even if I'm not that great at exams and I find them really stressful. Don't get overly caught up in that. That's what I would tell myself, because I got really, really caught up in not being great at, say, A-level maths, and complete waste of time. I've never used trigonometry again.
I was just going to say, how much A-level maths do you have in your costume design career?
Sam, that's amazing. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge today. This has honestly been so fun and creative. And we'll make sure people check out your stuff. What can we share your Instagram? What's your Instagram handle so people can see the amazing sort of beetle-winged Cleopatra?
Everybody's got to check it out. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's Samantha _ That's it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sam. This has been a real treat.
Thanks, Sam. Oof. I mean, it was like you said. Oof. I mean, you said in the middle of it, I'm already learning so much and have had your mind blown. And for me, I just think, wow, I'm so grateful to her for the way that she phrased it and the takeaway that we've gotten, which is how essential costume is to storytelling and how it's actually a tool in the storytelling of a film.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And not just like a tool in the sense of like it is part of it. Like it is storytelling in a way. Like right. Certainly the way she phrased it. I've thought so much about costume embodying character, but I honestly hadn't really thought about it as embodying the story of that character, especially those elements of like foreshadowing. How you can almost foreshadow stuff through color and details. That really is just sort of next level storytelling in a way, I think.
Yeah. And you're right. It's not a tool, it's part of it. And it helps, I think, to elevate it. I think when you see a film with good costumes, that might not be the first thing you come away remembering, but one of the reasons, even maybe subconsciously, that you enjoyed the film probably was the costumes and the way that they were integrated into the storytelling.
Yeah.
Because I suppose that if you think about the opposite, which I definitely have seen films where you walk away and go, why was that character wearing that? It was such a weird outfit.
Yeah.
And then you think, well, it wasn't really integrated. It was just some fantastic piece that somebody wanted them to wear or whatever, but it didn't wholly kind of fit into the story. So yeah, that element of it is so key.
Yeah, there's this whole extra thing that I almost wish we got to talk about as well, where I feel like in many ways there's different ends of the spectrum, right? There's if you get the costumes wrong, you're going to notice them, and that is going to be awkward and detrimental because you're just sort of being like, what are they wearing, as you were saying? Then you got the other end of the spectrum where it's like, generally I'm thinking of like a period film where those gowns and dresses are just so front and center because they're so interesting and intriguing. But then you've got this middle section where it just needs to be really effective, and I feel like we've learned so much about what makes different things effective, but yes. It's almost like good editing. They always say that good editing is invisible editing. You're not even paying attention to it.
Yes.
And I definitely remember, like, as a teenager, trying to work out what the different characters in my films were going to wear, and the first time I really thought about it, I was like, I mean, I just don't want people to look at them and think that's weird. I just want people to be like, yeah, no, that makes sense. That's what they're
on
wearing.
A baseline. They don't think anything of the costume. Yeah, they just know it works.
Absolutely. And I think there's that sort of thing as well, where it's like, it needs to be really creative, but there is a threshold of it suddenly working against the film, and I think that's the true talent of like a really good costume designer, is that it's always going to work in service of the story. It's not going to unnecessarily grab your attention just for the sake of it, just to be like, hey, I worked on this film, just so you know, like that's why the characters are all wearing gold. But it is just effective storytelling and telling a story rather than just being there for the characters, you know.
It reminds me, we actually had quite an interesting conversation a few weeks ago in the office. I don't know if you remember it, but we talked about the new Mean Girls movie that's coming out.
Yes, yeah,
it's the adaptation of the stage musical, and you know, when they first released the kind of teaser images for that, they were lambasted because the costuming of the three main girls just didn't look right. It didn't look like what everybody really thought it should look like, which is so interesting. You know, you want to talk about storytelling, that clothing was telling a story that didn't seem to match with what people know of these characters. I mean, that's an interesting challenge, I think, as a costume designer, because you're working towards something that people already have an idea of.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I think it does matter in a way that, again, you're right. It's like, if it's good costume design, maybe it's a bit invisible.
Yeah.
Or I think, like you said, if it's genre, it can be so opulent and wonderful. I mean, I know, like, I really love the film The Favorite. And one of the reasons I love that film is that the costumes in that are, I mean, all of the set design in that is incredible.
Yeah.
And the costume design is just beyond. And so, yeah, it can really be impactful, for sure. Both good and bad.
100%. We've got a question that we're going to attempt to answer. It's quite a big question from Luca 16 from Edinburgh. Hello, Luca. Luca says, I don't know anything about costume design. Where do I start? And
well, you know where you start, Luca? Listening to this podcast episode.
Absolutely. You're in the right place if you've listened to this episode. You're in the right place.
Go and look at Sam's Instagram. No, we'll do. But I think, you know, in terms of starting out, you know, she touched on very briefly color theory. And I think that's a good place to start reading about color theory, to kind of create mood boards, as she said, that are not necessarily costume elements themselves, but are colors and feelings and you know, anything inspirational that lends you to the idea of the character. And then I think it's a lot of looking at examples. You know, Pinterest, I think, is a really good resource for someone just starting out, because you can see lots of different things and how different people approach it. And then you can use that to inspire your own approach. So that would be my advice. And you know, I'm sure there's lots of great books out there on costume design. So check out some books, perhaps, if you would really want to get into it. But then again, I think it's about doing what we were talking about, which is thinking about the story and thinking, how can I bring the story to life through what these characters are wearing? And that's a good place to start as any.
Yeah, I'm basically just going to parrot and echo what you're saying. The thing I wanted to hone in on is looking for examples. And I think that's just the key. If you don't know where to start with any of these sort of disciplines in film, watch a film that you think is similar to the film that you're trying to make, and analyze that aspect of it. So look at the costumes in, say, a horror film, if you're trying to make a horror film, and analyze what are all the characters wearing at any one time. How does it tell the story, and try and work out why they have made the decisions they have made. So don't just copy it because it's like, oh, well, that person wears a white t-shirt, so I'll put my main character in a white t-shirt. Think about, okay, why are they wearing that white t-shirt? And in horror films, the answer is normally because it shows up dirt and blood very well. So, you know, think of the reasons that you might put that they've chosen, and then see if you can apply any of that same logic to your own films. Would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Perfect. So make sure you send us your questions to podcast@youngfilmacademy.co.uk, and we hope to answer them on a relevant future episode. So thank you for joining. To Sam, to Amelia, this has been fun as always.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Nice to turn the lens on something a little bit different, and we will continue to do so. So keep your eyes, ears, and nose peeled to the podcast page. It's not really called a page, is it? You know what I mean. On Apple, Spotify, all those places.
Wait a minute. Is that a podcast I smell? I think it is. I think it's a podcast.
Oh, wow. I know what I can smell as well. It's the end of the episode. Oh, wow. See you next time.